Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 4 of Cyber Scotland Week. It's been a fantastic week. We're over the hump now and on the home straight. Thank you very, very much for joining us this morning for this Cyber Essentials session. We've got a mix of people attending here today, and it's lovely to see you all. We've got some people who have grant funding from SCVO to complete Cyber Essentials, and they're here to pick the brains of our experts to get some help on their journey. And we've got other people attending who are curious about what Cyber Essentials is all about. And as I say, you're all very, very welcome. We've got quite an informal session today. It's day 4. I'm sick of looking at PowerPoints, so we've decided we're just going to have a little bit of a chat with the 3 experts that we have with us, who all have different views on the Cyber Essentials scheme. So I'm going to read their bios, and then I'm going to hand over first to Neil, who is from IASME, who are the accreditation body that run the Cyber Essentials scheme. And he's going to give you a little bit of background to the scheme itself, and a little bit about what you want to know or what you need to know before you embark on the journey. That will be followed by Steve, who is representing Hey Girls, the community interest company today, who have just recently completed Cyber Essentials with SCVO funding, and he's going to talk a little bit about, yay, I see a certificate. Well done. He's going to talk a little bit about how he found the journey going through the accreditation from their perspective, which is always really nice to hear. And then finally, we've got Mark, who's going to give us the IT managed service providers viewpoint, and talk a little bit about some of the struggles that he finds that organizations have when they're trying to get this together. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of their bios, and then I'm going to hand you over to Neil to kick off. So we'll start with Neil. Neil has a background as an IT manager and IT support across a wide range of companies. He has a deep understanding of IT support, technical and real-life cyber security issues. He's currently IASME's technical lead for the Cyber Essentials scheme and works regularly with major IT providers to ensure IASME has the latest updates on issues like the end of life for commonly used software, which is a really important thing. Neil is also a key member of IASME and the NCSC Joint Technical Working Group for the Cyber Essentials scheme. So we've got the top dog in the room today, which is great. Steve is head of operations and a director at Hey Girls, the CIC. He spent a lot of years with British Telecom in research and project management roles before joining IBM Global Services in 2008. A stint in Australia with IBM managing programs for large corporates followed. On return to the UK, he volunteered with Hey Girls while still working for IBM, finally joining Hey Girls full-time in October 2019. Typically, Steve deals with high finance, manufacturers' orders and shipping, as well as managing IT systems and stock-related matters with their third parties. He's well qualified in project management and is also a mental health first aider. Mark is the managing director of M3 Networks and one of the 3 founding directors that started the business in 2009. M3 Networks are cybersecurity specialists based in Perth, but are all over the UK and are soon opening another office down south. They provide the cybersecurity services and strategy needed to protect organizations from modern threats, consistently achieving only over 99% customer satisfaction. Mark holds a BSc in computer networking and is an approved Cyber Essentials practitioner. Away from business, he is a dad of 2 kids, a keen cyclist, runner, and has a passion for all motorsports, with the exception of F1. So that's a little bit of an overview as to who we've got in the room today. I think you'll agree they're all very worthy speakers. And I'm just going to hand over to Neil to kick off the session. Thanks, Neil.
Right. Good morning, everybody. I work at IASME, and let's give a bit of background about Cyber Essentials to start with. Cyber Essentials has been around, been in place since 2014, so about 7 years. And up until April 2020, there were 5 accreditation bodies for the scheme. But in 2019, the NCSC decided they would like to work with a single partner. And it was put out to tender. And what happened was we went through the tender process, and most of the accreditation bodies went through that. And in July 2019, we were awarded the contract to be the sole partner. and now we're referred to as the partner with the NCSE for the scheme. So there's been a big change in the last 12 months over how the scheme is run, and the reason for the change was to make the scheme more consistent, and how the NCSE really wanted the scheme to be applied from day one. There were 5 different interpretations previously, and now there's only one interpretation, which is the NCSE's interpretation. It was mentioned in my bio that I'm on the tech working group with the NCSE, and just to give a bit of background, that is made up of members of IASME and the NCSE, and we talk on a regular basis. By that means we talk on a weekly basis about issues around the scheme, developments around the scheme, how the scheme's going to evolve. And I'm not going to say those are easy conversations. They're actually quite difficult at times, but they're always very constructive conversations. And it's interesting to have the NCSE's opinion on their own scheme and how it should be handled. So the scheme at the moment still comprises of 5 controls, which is the access control, secure configuration, patch management, malware protection, firewalls and routers, and one of the key area which is the scoping of the scheme, which is can be the most challenging area actually to apply. And what that means is that all devices that are within scope for Cyber Essentials certification must be running a supported operating system. And what's caused a bit of a challenge over the last 3 or 4 years is that the timelines around the support levels or support timescales for operating systems has changed. Microsoft have vastly reduced the support timescales for Windows 10 for a version. They've now made it down roughly to 18 months. There are other rules depending on the edition you're doing or something like that. And that's caused a lot of confusion, and it can be troublesome, we know, for companies to keep up to date with the various operating systems. This also applies to mobile phones as well, and that's also a very big challenge. So one of the things and the advantages of the partnership being with the NCSE is because we now talk regular, and previously that wasn't happening, the scheme is now under constant review. So we, for the last 12 months, have been reviewing the scheme with the NCSE, and we are due to be bringing out some clarifications around the scheme in Q2 this year. And they are aspects of the scheme that have not been clarified that are in the requirements document, which is publicly available on the NCSE website. Some of those clarifications now will be documented in that document, and will be available hopefully very soon and available public sometime around April. So the review process it's the largest review of the Cyber Essentials scheme since the scheme started, and it's looking at all aspects. And of course, one of the biggest aspects is what's happened in the last 12 months with the pandemic and the huge growth in home working. We're still actually reviewing the home working requirements at this stage, and nothing is confirmed on what will be in the requirements document as of today. There are further review meetings going on, and I won't be able to give you any of the clarifications today if you ask questions about it, but I'll do my best I can to help you out on that. So that's what Cyber Essentials is. It is about protecting your devices about internet commodity attacks. And if you put the measures that are in Cyber Essentials into place, you're going to protect yourself. It's thought that 80% of commodity attacks or attacks against you, cybersecurity attacks, it will protect you by 80%. Okay, so that's a big reduction. These are basic controls. I could go into more depth about the basic controls, but I would take up everybody else's time today, and I could fill an hour. I could fill most of the day talking about it and giving you all scenarios. But what I want to make it clear is that the measures that are in there are basic, and they're supposed to be basic, but they are challenging for companies to put in place, and we know that. It's a different way of working or something, or we're, even now, 7 years down the line, we are still facing situations we've never heard of. My team deals with scoping queries every day of the week, and I can assure you we have scopes that we've never even thought of come up on a daily basis, and they prove very challenging. But somehow we work with companies and whatever to make sure that they can apply these basic controls. Now, some businesses will go above and beyond these controls, and that widely happens. But these basics are the basics, and they are the first rung on the ladder of anybody's cybersecurity journey. Okay, and they change perceptions. But I've always seen Cyber Essentials as two things: one, to gain a certification, but also to educate about cybersecurity and to start people on that journey. And I think that's very important. So you may have lots of questions about this, so you can come to IASME and the team will help support. We have a tech team that I manage, and we look after the queries about how to apply the scheme, etc. We work with a wide range of what we call certifying bodies who are all licensed to IASME to assess and advise on the scheme, and we have nearly 300 now, and that number is growing, and they are spread out throughout the UK, and we have some very good ones in Scotland, and I work very closely with a lot of Scottish CBs to provide the scheme. But the biggest challenge that's been about Cyber Essentials, and is for you guys out there, is there's a lot of information about Cyber Essentials and a lot of different interpretations that have existed for a number of years. But because we now have the partnership, there is one interpretation. It's the NCSE's interpretation of their own scheme. They are the scheme owners. They've asked IASME to do that. And I'm sure that's proved challenging to everybody who's on this call right now, who's had any dealings with Cyber Essentials, because it's appeared a little bit that perhaps the scheme has changed and evolved. The scheme interpretation that we work to with the NCSE is how the NCSE always wanted the scheme to be applied. But that doesn't mean it's not going to change and evolve over the next year, 18 months, to include new stuff, but also to take on board all the positive and negative feedback we've had about the scheme. And it's important to take the negative on the board, because we want to make it relatively easy to achieve, but we also want to make sure that you are meeting a certain standard that's there of cybersecurity. So Cyber Essentials is an all-encompassing accreditation that is made up of prescriptive measures rather than risk-based measures, so it doesn't allow for mitigation. Okay, so you're asked to set a certain character length password. You're asked to split your admin accounts and your user accounts, and that means, so there's prescriptive measures, so everybody's at the same standard when they have it. We're seeing enormous growth within within supply chains. The MOD asked for it a lot. We're seeing a lot of government departments. We see the Scottish government asking for it a lot now, and it's one of their they approved certifications that they like to mandate in certain contracts, etc. So there's a lot of growth going on with Cyber Essentials, and there's been a big growth even since the partnership. We became the sole partner last year. The number of certificates issued on a monthly basis is nearly doubled from the joint figure that was last March. It's now nearly double that figure every month. So there's still enormous growth to be had, and we need to work with different industries, etc., and sectors like this one here today. And that's why I've been welcomed along to talk about the subject. And that's where we are really with Cyber Essentials. That's the position at the moment, and I'm happy to talk about any aspect of the scheme.
Fantastic, Neil. Thank you very much. Well, we had one question that was around scoping and the term you use. What does scoping mean for people who...
Scoping is where you set out when you apply for Cyber Essentials, what area of your company or network of your company is going to obtain a certificate on. Okay, so normally the scoping is split up into networks. Ideally, we always want everybody to be whole company, but we do realize that that's not always possible because some legacy systems are still required, or the physical cost of changing all operating systems is just enormous to some companies and organizations based on their funding. So there is a way to de-scope outside the certification. So for instance, if you still have Windows 7 machines, you'd need to de-scope them from certificate because Windows 7 is no longer supported. And that is it can get very complicated, but that's where CBs and trusted advisors and MSPs, etc., come in to help those organizations with that aspect. Okay.
Okay, that's great. And another thought, there is, particularly when you're talking about the Scottish Government wanting this as a prerequisite to tenders, is there any possibility of anything more entry level than Cyber Essentials? Because for some very small organisations, it's still quite a reach. I'm
not aware of anything, and it's difficult for me to say if there is something.
Sure.
I know there's some pre-assessment tools coming out that might help provide further guidance from the NCSC over coming weeks. They've got their own cyber aware scheme, which is bringing out a pre-assessment tool for that, which may provide guidance. And IASME ourselves are bringing out a pre-assessment CE, so that might help with making it a bit easier and understanding. There'll be lots of guidance involved with those two. So IASME ourselves has written a lot of guidance for the pre-assessment. And I can't remember where it's pre-assessment. I think they've changed the name of it, so I'll just have to correct myself on that. But I'm not aware of anything myself. Okay.
Right. That's wonderful. There are a couple of other questions that are popping up, but I think we'll move on just now to Steve, and then we'll go through all of these at the end, if that's okay. Steve, can I ask you?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the opportunity to speak about the journey of Hey Girls through cybersecurity. Just a quick bit of background. Hey Girls CIC is a supplier of period products, largely to the Scottish Government via Scotland Excel, and we also have a presence in various superstores, a lot of B2B and B2C supply, and we are becoming the prime suppliers to Welsh public sector as well. That is actually important for two reasons. One is we've grown phenomenally in the last 3 years, which means that we've got a bunch more people than we started out with, 1.5 of us and a kitchen table. We've now got two warehouse locations, one of which is at the back of me here, and another one in England. And and with that, we have quite clearly more IT, to the extent we've got IT coming out of our ears. The public sector aspect of it, as was described before by Neil, is most of the government contracts now demand that organisations who want to successfully tender have Cyber Essentials. We got away with it for a while by saying we are working towards it, and yes, we were working towards it, and we had a bunch of money from Alison, and then COVID kicked in. So what we tried to do during that period was to get the questionnaire for Cyber Essentials, and to be honest, we bounced off it. It was a little bit on the complex side, even for someone who's fairly well versed in IT as I am, and a lot of it was demanding the need for things like patch management has been mentioned, and without a tool to do that successfully, then you're probably not going to do it very well. And potentially buying a tool to do that kind of thing is not economic for a small business, basically. So at the time, back in March last year, we were just about to engage with a managed service provider. But the uncertainty, quite clearly, of COVID, what was going to happen, would we have a business in three months' time, suggested it wasn't the sensible thing to sign a contract for a managed service provision with a certain amount of cash every month. So we delayed it all and until well, we successfully have negotiated COVID. We are still supplying, we're still working, we're still doing good stuff. So we did in November last year sign up for a managed service provider, and part of that, i.e. bundled in the price, which was one of the reasons we chose that managed service provider. They weren't going to charge us extra for doing the assessments and the advice for Cyber Essentials. Was the Cyber Essentials guidance and help and assessments, etc. So there were a few things that came out of it, which to some of us might be uncomfortable. One was the fact that when you split the admin and user accounts, then and you've got a managed service provider, you and your colleagues lose the capability to do your own thing on your machines. So you can't just go and get an application from somewhere, a dodgy application or even a robust one, and put it on your computer because you've got a problem you want to solve. So you've got to get your managed service providers to do that. You've given away control, and as I say, that sometimes makes people uncomfortable. However, it also means that you get a proper job done, and they will stop you. You might say to them, I want an application on my machine that does X, and let's have this one. And they would probably say, hang on, you don't want that one because it's not necessarily secure, it's not necessarily the right thing for the job that you want doing. So you get that fantastic advice from the day-to-day, the professionals who are steeped in IT day-to-day. So that was a really good thing in reality, even though the giving away control is a little bit, oh no, what we're going to do. Another thing that I was unaware of, and I should not have been, was that our Windows 10 machines had all been bought from Curry's PC World or similar, and they all came with Windows 10 Home operating system. And we were using them for a business purpose. So we were breaching the terms of the license for a start. And also we didn't have access to a lot of the good security stuff that is in Windows 10 Professional. So they've all been updated to Windows 10 Professional now. So we get the thing, it's known as BitLocker, is a really key thing because that encrypts your hard drive and stops people poking around. If you do get an attack, it makes it much more difficult for them to steal information from your actual machine itself. So that was good. That comes at a cost, of course. And we've already bought computers with Windows 10 Home in there. But we had to pay another couple of £100 per machine to get those licenses upgraded. So there's a bit of a learning point there. Next time we have to buy a machine for somebody, we will probably go somewhere else and not effectively waste the money on the Windows 10 Home license. So what else did we find as we went through it? That's almost it, to be honest. The assessment was done fairly easily over a number of weeks because there were a few things we had to do, such as obviously getting those licenses upgraded, providing information about our cloud storage and our other cloud applications as well, because technically they are part of or can be part of the scope. So we need confidence that we're not putting customer information into, I don't know, our account system, for instance, which is a cloud system. and it is not protected. So there's that was part of the scope. We also needed some attention to things like default passwords on the broadband connections into the offices and things like that, which changed the default ones effectively, and and squirrel those away with the managed service provider. And then the assessment by the whoever did the assessment, I don't know who did it. Certification body was CyberSmart, who's, I guess, is part of IASME's network, and that did not take long at all. And it was only a Monday when the certificate came through. I think we actually got certificated up about the 2nd or 3rd of February. So it was pretty painless, and I would advise always get your if you believe you need a managed service provider for your IT support, which I think I would always recommend, then when you are negotiating, get the Cyber Essentials bundled in with the price. It's not going to be free, obviously, but if it's bundled in, then it's less painful. Because if they say, oh, congratulations, it's 200 quid a month or whatever, and then another £1,000 to get yourself certified, then you start bouncing off a bit sometimes. So I would always do that. And I can only recommend tech support at Summerhall in Edinburgh if you want to talk to them about that kind of thing. There are many other providers as well. He said in his best BBC, cover your options. But they've been great guys. So I think that's it. Yeah.
Brilliant, Steve. That's great. There have been a couple of questions pop up. Again, I think we'll take them at the end. I'm going to hand over to one of the other managed service providers that are available, which is Mark Riddell of M3 Networks. Mark, do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the foibles that you encounter when you're taking people through their Cyber Essentials journey?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Alison. Hi, everyone. It's great to hear from Neil and Stephen. Of course, you always see things from your own viewpoint. So, it's really nice to see how the accreditation body and other people that we haven't worked with, Stephen, have gone through it with other managed IT service providers or cybersecurity or Cyber Essentials experts. So, yeah, so we sit on the customer side of the table. So we work with organizations to prepare them and get them ready for certifications, so that the certification is the easy part. It's usually the worrying part for people, but if you prepare for anything, it's easy, right? So if we prepare for Cyber Essentials, then it's easy. And we've been through it with enough businesses of all shapes and sizes, a lot of small charities, down to a couple of users, right up to organizations, with, a dozen sites spread across the UK. So we've seen it from all sides of the accreditation. And like Neil says, it's accessible to all, which is the great thing about it, but I would just echo his point that it is the beginning of a cybersecurity journey, and it is definitely not what you would rely on in its entirety to cover all bases. Quite worryingly, some conversations I've had with some kind of larger companies is that some businesses, and this is, I guess, foible number one, Alison, is that some businesses get Cyber Essentials and think that's it. We're cyber secure, and I spoke to a business that had an IT manager, they had about 170 users, and because he didn't have a background in cybersecurity and didn't really know much about cybersecurity in general himself, he thought we had Cyber Essentials Plus, that's it, and that was their strategy for tackling cybersecurity. And I was like, well, it's great that you have it, and I would expect a business of your size to have it, but what else have you done to go on from there? What is the kind of the next steps? But to kind of answer the question, I would say the biggest challenge I think a lot of organizations have is that if you've had bad IT management up until the point where you want to try and get Cyber Essentials, then that throws up a whole lot of challenges. So some of the things that Stephen said, so if you've been going to Curry's PC Oil and buying Windows 10 home machines, you find out that actually having home machines doesn't really allow for great IT management in itself, then that can cause you a problem, and it is a cost that you didn't see coming. So if you've had bad IT management up to that point. You know, if you're an organization, it's either been managing your IT internally yourself, if there's been one person in the business that's been seen as the IT expert and they've been doing their best to keep things running, or the business owner's been kind of dealing with it themselves, then that throws up challenges because things might not have been getting done, you know, in a professional IT manner up to that point. But if you have been working with an IT service provider, even if they're not, you know, very well versed in cyber essentials, just by working with a professional IT company, you hopefully, I can only speak for how we operate, but hopefully they'll have been doing a lot of the things and keeping you right with a lot of the cyber essentials stuff, as it were. So things like Neil's mentioned already, like passwords, user access control, not allowing users just to install, you know, whatever they want to on their machine. So you might have a lot of these things kind of already kind of ticked off to a point. I think the single biggest challenge I think we see for organizations, and this is organizations that we are not working with for IT support, but businesses that come to us for cyber essentials, is patch management. I think Neil's obviously touched on this as well, but patch management seems to be a big problem. And the reason it's a big problem is because a lot of IT companies, I say managed service providers tend to be better at this because the word managed is the key thing. But a lot of people are using IT companies that are not actually delivering patch management as part of the service. I mean, for us, it's something we've always done. We've done it, you know, we were doing it in 2009 when we started our business, and, you know, obviously we're still doing it now. And patch management is just one of these things. And it's one of these things where, yes, it's an IT thing, but it's also a security thing, right? So we've always done it. You know, we've been doing it even Cyber Essentials, you know, as Neil says, it's been around since 2014. Well, we were doing patch management for clients 5 years before that. So none of these things are really new. A lot of these things were just good IT practice that has now been, you know, seen as this is what good looks like. So patch management seems to be a problem. Quite often it's a problem for businesses, especially now in the whole working from home COVID situation, where there's a lot more personal devices in use, you know, because like your IT infrastructure for a lot of businesses just exploded overnight, right? I mean, you know, we supply a lot of hardware, so we've seen like the supply or availability of laptops just like dropped off. Like you literally couldn't get anything, you know, a year ago, you know, when back last March, April. So businesses scrambling to buy devices for the users, but that created problems. It put the price up. The price of hardware went through the roof. So a lot of organizations just couldn't afford to buy hardware. So, you know, you had staff saying, well, I've got a personal laptop, so I'm happy just to use that. Well, member of staff might be happy just to use that, but is that the right thing to do in terms of your organization? So what happened, I think, was a lot of businesses that already had cyber essentials pre-COVID, suddenly the way that they're working now is that they're not adhering to the standard, you know, at all, because they've had to keep the business running. They've had to get staff working from home. And of course, maintaining a standard that they got certified for several months ago is not at the forefront of their mind. So it's easy to let things slip. So the next kind of biggest challenge I would see is that, yes, getting accreditation isn't as challenging as what some people think it is. Maintaining it, though, is the key, right? I often compare it to like the MOT in your car. You know, that happens once a year, but it's what happens in between that. It's the servicing, it's the checking the tires, checking the oil, these kind of things, right? So one thing that we do for our cybersecurity clients is we do audits. So we do quarterly cyber essentials audits throughout the year, so that we maintain it, because we know that, you know, and you guys will appreciate that your IT network can change very, very quickly. It only takes, you know, a new user, you know, a new device, you know, something can change that would, you know, make you fail cyber essentials very, very easily. Very, very easily. So maintaining the standard is the important thing. It's like anything, getting a certification is good, maintaining it is even better, and actually taking it, as Neil says, beyond just cyber essentials is the cherry on top. So yeah, that's often a challenge. You know, we work with a mix of businesses. We've got customers that we've taken through cyber essentials that we've worked with as IT support clients for years. So of course it's very easy because we're managing their IT to get them through cyber essentials. But we also work with businesses that have come to us because they either find out that their current IT provider just has no experience in it, and they've been going on for months and months and months and months and getting nowhere, and either through events like this or through a referral from someone we've worked with. They'll come and say, look, we need to get it, and we need to get someone. And so we can work with businesses that have got an IT provider already. In those situations, we see a lot more problems, quite rightly, because we've not been managing their IT. So like I said, a lot of the things might have been not in place already. User access control, is another big problem, where especially in smaller organizations, because hey, everyone trusts each other in a small business, right? So we just say, well, everyone's got access to everything. And we've seen that in businesses where every single member of the staff has access to every single folder and file on their NAS drive or on a shared drive somewhere. And they're like, yeah, we know it shouldn't really be like that, but we're a small team and we'll trust each other. Well, when it comes to security, it's not really acceptable just to go on a trust basis like that with people. So that's a big problem. Anti-malware, or just what we used to call antivirus, but anti-malware controls now as well. In smaller organizations, you see, again, not a single kind of coherent approach to malware. So you might see an organization where every single user's installed a different free antivirus program. And again, like Stephen's already touched upon, a not for commercial use antivirus program. So it's something that's only licensed for home users. So the minute you're using it in a commercial environment, you're breaching the licensing of the software. Plus, IT doesn't have eyes on it. So it's, is it up to date? When does the last scans get run? These are all, you're putting the user in control of a lot of these things. When it comes to IT management, we talk about the glue, IT glue. What's gluing all your IT together? So, managed antivirus is a key one as well. And that makes Cyber Essentials very easy, as Neil will probably agree with, where you can easily take, from your central managed antivirus system, or your IT provider can easily get a screenshot. Here's the health and the status and updates of all our endpoints. And then there you go, there's evidence that you have, anti-malware systems in place. So that's a challenge as well. So making sure you have a business grade antivirus product that's also managed, preferably by an IT provider. So you take the responsibility away from the user, because let's be honest, it's not really fair to expect users to be managing this stuff themselves. Because ultimately, when something goes wrong, they don't have the skill set and experience to maybe see that there was a potential problem. And lastly, I think biggest problem we still see is shared passwords. There's still a lot of organizations that have multiple accounts, and they're still sharing the same passwords across multiple business accounts. And whilst I can understand why, and we know through obviously Cyber Essentials, that's not always a key issue, right? So for example, we've got some dental clients. So in the dental world, they have a reception desk, and it's not really feasible for them to be logging into computers all the time, because it takes time, right? And they've got patients standing there and the phone's ringing. So they will have like a reception login username for all the reception computers. And that is perfectly acceptable for Cyber Essentials, as long as if a member of staff was to leave the organization, that would trigger the password to be reset. So the only people who need to be able to log in have the login for it. So this is where there are areas and kind of things, as Neil said, that pass Cyber Essentials that some people might think, well, we wouldn't be able to pass because we've got the same login across multiple accounts. That's kind of not true. So yes, there is a standard, but how it applies to every business can be different depending on what that business does. Hope that helps.
That's brilliant, Mark. Thank you. That's actually been really, really useful from all of you. So you've all earned your coffee and biscuits that you're going to have after this. There are so many questions coming in. We've got a whole raft of questions from the audience. I'm so pleased to see those. Siobhan, is there any that you want to highlight just now?
Yes, there absolutely is. So there's been a few people asking about volunteers. Obviously, this is an event for third sector. So most of the organisations here are charities. They have a lot of volunteers who work for them. By the very nature of charities, volunteers need to have access to systems to be able to input data in particular. So can we have a bit of a chat about how we allow our volunteers access to the systems that they need, but they're maybe using personal devices? What should be put in place to enable the organisation to still meet Cyber Essential requirements and gain their certification?
Who wants to take that?
Right, I'll take the CE partner view on this, okay? Right, and it might not sit very comfortable, but volunteer devices are in scope for Cyber Essentials because they're still accessing the same organizational data and services as a business device. They're treated as BYOD devices, and they can be just as risky as any other device, any other BYOD device out there, and they need to meet the controls of Cyber Essentials. And now that seems like a harsh thing, but unfortunately with Cyber Essentials there are no allowances for different sectors or vectors here, or verticals. It is tricky, but we see this, and then there has been this large growth because of the pandemic as well. And BYOD, I have to say, has always been part of the scheme. It's very clear in the requirements document available from the NCSC that BYOD is part of it, and they say it is a big risk. So it's not going to be removed from the scheme. And from personal experience, I have seen, before I was with IASME, issues where BYOD brought issues to various companies, etc., because they were less controlled than the normal business devices. Okay.
I can add to that if you want from our point of view.
Yeah.
There's a reason someone's just asked what BYOD means. It means bring your own device, or sometimes in the IT world we call it bring your own disaster, because which is a bit funny, but it's actually kind of quite serious, like Neil says, in that it does have to, the controls have to be in place for these things. So we've seen examples where customers may say, look, we've got staff using their own devices, but what the business will do is the business will then include that under their support and management from us. So it's not their device, but we will then provide our IT support, we'll put our endpoint and security on it, and we'll manage the device to the best that we can. The biggest problem we find, especially with obviously like computers, is that most people's home devices are Windows Home. So if you're running like a Windows domain, we can't bring it in as part and kind of join it to the network like that. But we can do the best we can that is going to, well, one, make it secure and make it compliant, through Cyber Essentials. There's things that you can do, obviously, I'm sure most people are comfortable and maybe used a VPN in the past, a virtual private network to connect. So putting everything behind a VPN is still a great way to go, especially we've seen a lot of businesses, turn to using remote desktop, services and things like that. It's important that these things are set up in a secure way. I think what we've seen is a lot of businesses obviously very, very had to quickly pivot to getting staff working from home overnight. And everyone thought this was going to be temporary, right? Everyone thought everyone will go home and work for a couple of weeks. And here we are a year later. The important thing is that now that these things are more either permanent or semi-permanent, it's important that if you haven't then reviewed how you've been setting things up a year ago, that you probably should look at those devices now. And policies are great. Yeah, bring your own device policies for staff. And that includes mobile devices as well, staff accessing email or whatever else systems on mobile devices. So yeah, it is a big problem. It's always been a big problem for IT, and it just exploded, a year ago. It became even worse to manage.
So Mark, if you were doing the managed IT and the piece there that you said about you would be assisting to manage the volunteers' devices, could we actually be talking to our volunteers as that this is a benefit to them volunteering for us, that we would be adding extra security to their home devices and making their whole device more secure? Is that correct?
Well, yes, but also in a way that we'll be putting more restrictions on their own personal device, which they may not like. So for example, if we have, so one thing we do as part of our cybersecurity stack is like web content filtering, for example, and that's done at a device level. So what's going to happen is the business is going to be able to see the web traffic or see what content, not particularly down to URL level, but what categories of traffic, that device has been accessing from home. So of course, everyone uses their devices, not just for work, but for personal use. So, someone, and it might not be that it's anything illegal, but it might be things that they wouldn't want their employer to know that they do online, right?
Sure.
So if we were to include that, then the employee has to be fully aware that what we're going to see, what we're going to access to, what restrictions are going to be put in place. Because it might be that, you know, they have very legit websites that they access from home, but it's excluded from the business's acceptable content. And so it's that trade-off between this is someone's personal device that they bought and they own, but we are actually putting restrictions on it. You know, it's like if employees use their own car for work, but you put a speed restriction on it to say they can't go over 70 an hour, they probably wouldn't be happy with that because it's their own personal car, right?
Sure.
Same kind of thing, but
That's
just
a great analogy. Thank you. So one solution that I'm thinking of along these lines, which then mirrors a question that was asked, is I do some work in no code. So that's looking at setting up forms and things that volunteers can fill in that then adds to your internal databases. So they don't actually log in to anything internally, but they can still give you the data. Is that a solution that would solve this issue around security of home devices? And then that links into the question that Matt's asked, which is all about cloud security and how secure are we working on the cloud? And especially if we've had Cyber Essentials and then we move to the cloud, do we need to then go through Cyber Essentials? Is there anything different? And then Elaine added to that question that she's concerned about the Internet of Things, and all of those devices can be connected to people's home devices. So can we have a bit of a conversation then around cloud security and what we need to do differently compared to actual physical devices?
Okay, I'll just pick up on the cloud. Currently, the cloud is not fully covered in Cyber Essentials, only things that's what's called infrastructure as a service. So if you have a network of servers in the cloud, that would be in scope if you're in charge of the updating or patching of those particular servers. As far as actual cloud services such as Google Workspace or MS365 or what was known as Office 365 previously, they're not actually in scope at the present time. But I mentioned in my little time I had that we were doing a project about the evolutions of Cyber Essentials, and that's one area we're looking to bring into the scheme about it. And I can't give you any details on it because we've not even had a meeting about it yet, but that actually all that work starts next week. But that is an important, because Cyber Essentials needs to evolve to be up to date with some of the latest developments. And we know that cloud is now the predominant systems in use, because it gives small businesses access to big business systems. And that has been huge growth, and Cyber Essentials needs to evolve to incorporate that. And that work is going to begin in earnest very shortly.
That's fantastic, Neil. I think I'm certainly reading some of the comments that there really is a desire from the third sector to look at something more entry level than Cyber Essentials. So I would say on behalf of the audience here, we're very interested in your pre-assessment tool. And when that's available, please do share it with us, because it may be the stepping stone that we need to get third sector organizations up to the point where they can take on Cyber Essentials with confidence.
Yeah. Yeah, I did see a comment earlier said, when was it? Can we share it? It's not actually been launched yet, but it's due in the next, I believe, within the next month, and we'll get the link sent out to you for that when it comes on board.
Thank you.
Maybe just to add kind of to that, because I've seen a few comments about, you know, is there anything kind of more entry level? I mean, Cyber Essentials is called Essentials for a reason. I mean, the way I see it is that security should be difficult to achieve, because if it's too easy to achieve, then is it really secure? You know, I mean, you should have to work to get it. If it's something that you can just, you know, it's not a tick box exercise, if it's something that you can just get to get a badge and you don't have to work to get it, then you're not really improving anything, are you? So it's all about improving what you're doing. And the way I see it is that, could you do anything less than Cyber Essentials? I think maybe some of the people that are saying that maybe just don't fully understand what's involved, because it is, once people understand it a little bit more, and Neil says it's probably not enough time to go into it in depth here, but once people, my view is once people understand it, they actually go, oh, so it's not as difficult as what I think, because people get into this big whole complex thing, and it's not really, you know. So that's just my view. And another thing to add as well is that even if you can't, you know, if it's down to cost or whatever, if you can't achieve it because of cost or working with an MSP or something like that, then the standard's there. Anyone can look at the standard, take it, and still work to that best practice without getting a certification. It just means you wouldn't get the accreditation. So there's nothing to stop people still trying to improve what they're doing just by, adhering to it, to a standard. That's kind of just my take on that.
I think that's a really good point, Mark, and it's something that we've heard from a lot of the sessions this week. It's about taking that kind of personal and organizational responsibility to educate yourself and to try and be as secure as possible. And if the cost is prohibited, to do what you can. But we are a third sector event, so can we talk a bit more about that cost? Is there plans, Emma has asked, which is mirrored by Kim, to help charities with any ongoing costs to sustain their cyber essentials over time? Would it be possible to have a tiered system? Is that in place for different sizes of organisations, or discounts for charities?
I can come in from a funding perspective. I know there is unfortunately no intent from Scottish Government to fund any more grant funding for cyber essentials. We have, as an organisation with the backing of SG, have put through 207 organisations to do cyber essentials, which is fantastic, and I'm delighted at that. But from an SG perspective, the funding for that is now past. So yeah, maybe Kim's asking about economies of scale, and packages are available. For anybody who doesn't know, the basic certification is £300, Neil, is that correct?
Yes, that's the price.
Yeah. So Mark, I don't know if you guys do packages to get people through the accreditation, and is there bulk buying power available?
No one's ever asked us about bulk buying, but I mean, every business is different and every scope's different though, so it's kind of difficult to kind of lump things together. I mean, for us, where we come from is the certification fee is the certification fee. That's set by IASME and things. Nothing we can really do about that, and that money just flows through us and flows out again. What we do is we have initial conversations with businesses to understand what their IT infrastructure looks like. So if we are not managing their IT, of course, we're completely in the dark. So we'll find out more about their IT. Is it all on premise? Is it in cloud? What's the makeup of the IT network? And then based on that, we'll use our experience to give them a fixed price for certification. That's just to cover our time and effort to get them ready to prepare do all the paperwork, do all the stuff. So it's very much a handheld process through it, and we encourage people to be involved in it as much as possible. Unfortunately, for some businesses, it is a tick box exercise because it's a procurement thing. Like Neil said, they're trying to do tenders or whatever. We tend to only really want to work with businesses that are doing it for the right reasons, because that's important to us, because it's why we do it. Why are we doing it? It's to improve the security of your organization. Unfortunately, that's not true for all businesses. It's maybe different in the private sector, where that maybe is more of a tick box exercise. But I think I would say most people do generally do it for the right reasons and get it. What we did see though is that because we did have the funding, the private sector, we've seen a lot of businesses that came to us for certification, but then when it came to renewal 12 months later, they decided not to renew because there was no funding. So pretty much did it because someone else was paying for it, which wasn't for the right.
Thanks for that, Mark. So just time for one very last question. We're almost out of time. So there's been a question about using MacBooks. So I think that's quite important. There's that distinction between Apple and Windows, and quite a lot of support seems to have been talking about Windows. What about MacBooks and other Apple devices, and how do we keep them secure as well?
I can answer this because IASME use MacBooks. So we have to abide by the Cyber Essentials rules as anybody else does, and all the controls that are within Cyber Essentials. I'm going to say all of them. Maybe there's one that can't, but that's only come to light in the last couple of days, to be honest, because of the latest one. All the controls can be applied to the MacBooks, and say that's what IASME use. So we have the anti-malware software requirement, we cover the password requirements, the software firewall requirements. It's all there with it built in within the Mac operating system. Perhaps besides the anti-malware software, that would be an additional cost, we think. But But yes, MacBooks and Chromebooks as well out there, they are covered. We do talk to the major vendors to get the latest from them where possible. I can tell you it's very difficult trying to get anything out of Apple, but we do talk to Microsoft. The NCSC have introduced us and we work with them. And the NCSC do talk to the major vendors, and they've feedback from those vendors comes into the scheme, and we'll do in future evolutions of the scheme. But yes, the MacBooks definitely are covered as well.
Yeah, we got 4 or 5 MacBooks. I think it's 5, which were part of the scope, obviously. So it was fairly painless.
Brilliant, thank you. So we're almost out of time, literally got 1 minute left. So just over to Alison to wrap it up.
Okay. I found that fantastic and really, really interesting session. I hope everybody in the audience has. I think just judging by the amount of questions that have come up, and I know we haven't been able to answer some of them, and I can only apologize to those. It really has hit what it needed to do. So thank you very, very much for coming along, and thank you to our speakers. If there are anything